In many ways, the Navy that is currently being built in the Philippines is a new one. In the 1990s, the old Navy had fallen into a state of obsolescence so that it did not have ships capable of fighting in modern seas. Indeed, with the exception of one World War II-era destroyer guard, the Navy does not have ships larger than 62 meters offshore patrol vessels. But in the coming years, the Philippine Navy will for the first time obtain a full spectrum of anti-air, anti-ship, anti-submarine, and unprecedented contemporary electronic warfare. However, it remains to be seen whether the Philippine Navy will acquire this capability in sufficient quantity or quality to present credible deterrence to various Filipino challengers in the South China Sea. As a vast archipelago involved in large maritime negotiations, the Philippines can be expected to devote more resources to its navy, but not for decades. Some associate that choice with Manila's need to combat internal threats. Others hope that the old Philippine security agreement with the United States is sufficient to protect its maritime borders. And others are betting that its greatest maritime antagonist, the People's Republic of China, will eventually lose interest in sovereignty talks and focus on joint economic development. Xi Jinping's rise to the Chinese presidency in 2013 solved the last problem, ending the ongoing debate within the Chinese government. He stressed China's territory in the South China Sea. Unfortunately for Manila, its American allies are trapped in the middle of the axis, or balancing, of resources to Asia at the time. It will not be until the end of President Barack Obama's second term before the United States will make a concerted effort to push back against Chinese behavior in the region. At that time it was too late for the Philippines. China has enlarged the islands it occupies in the Spratly archipelago and built military installations on it. It also arrested Scarborough Shoal, which the Philippines claimed, after months of deadlock in 2012. Meanwhile, Chinese treatment of Filipino fishermen increased. In response, then Philippine President Benigno Aquino III sought to rebuild his foreign defense forces and work with other Southeast Asian prosecutors in the region. He also brought and won important cases against Chinese claims in international courts. While his successor, Rodrigo Duterte, has since decided to make friends with China and set aside the court's decision, he has not stopped the buildup of the Philippine military, the main beneficiary who has become a navy. Now, the new Philippine Navy has begun to form. Within a year, the ship will deploy 4 frigates, 1 Corvette, and 2 strategic sealift vessels. These include 2 former high-class American Coast Guards of Hamilton Resilience, who have been upgraded and reclassified as frigates, and 2 new frigates of Jose Rizal made in South Korea, who will provide the Navy with its first dedicated anti-dedication air warfare abilities. In August, the Philippine Navy commissioned the former South Korean Pohang-class Corvette, the first naval ship equipped with an integrated sonar system. Recently, rumors have begun to inflate that South Korea plans to donate 2 retired Pohang-class corvettes to the Philippines, which in return will buy 2 newly built corvettes. More ships are expected. Austal, an Australian shipbuilder, has expanded the Philippines shipyard in preparation for new offshore patrol vessels. In 2019, the Philippines issued tenders for 2 ship landing piers that could accommodate 4 landing craft and 500 troops. And it is likely to order 2 more frigates from South Korea before 2022. Finally, he has explored the possibility of building submarines with several international shipbuilders. Philippine Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana even welcomed the possibility of an agreement for a Russian Kilo-class diesel-electric submarine in 2018. While it makes America horrified, it is clear that even the Philippine government that is friendly with China will continue to expand its naval power. To fulfill all of its new ships, the Navy hopes to increase its rank to 2,000 to 24,000 by 2020. So far, the acquisition of the Philippine Navy has come close to what is set out in the SAIL 2020 strategic plan and the proposed Philippine Navy blend in 2012. These documents envision a naval structure consisting of 3 diesel-electric submarines, 6 anti-frigate air warfare, 12 anti-submarine warfare corvettes, and 4 strategic sealift ships by 2027. With such power, the Navy argues, it can create credible deterrence. While the force may be compatible with navies in most Southeast Asian countries, it will still be difficult to compete with China, whose navy includes 9 nuclear attack submarines, 59 diesel-electric submarines, aircraft carriers, 33 destroyers, 53 frigate, and 42 corvettes. For now, preventing enemies from operating safely in confined areas, perhaps the best that the new Philippine Navy can achieve. And that can only do that if it gets submarines, and more than 3 of them. Practically, it's still years away. Without prior experience with submarines, the Navy must obtain maintenance facilities, rescue equipment, simulators, and the skills needed to ensure that it can operate the submarine fleet at any strength. However, whatever the Philippine Navy can do to better protect Philippine offshore natural gas blocks, especially those close to the Malampaya Gas and Electric Power Project, which supplies half the energy of the country's main island, Luzon, will be a step forward. Doing so can give energy companies the confidence to explore the blocks and increase the country's energy security. At the very least, a small but capable Philippine Navy will enable it to pursue a fleet strategy, where its presence nearby can make larger opponents think twice before acting. But before the Philippine Navy can do that, it must arm more ships with anti-air and anti-ship missiles and connect them with remote sensors at sea or in the air. The approach taken by the Philippines is very different from the approach of Vietnam. Hanoi must also rebuild its navy to better protect its claims in the South China Sea. But the Vietnamese approach has focused on developing the ability of sea rejection from the start. After gaining experience with the North Korean middle-class Yugo midget submarine, the submarine ordered 6 Russian Kilo-class diesel-electric submarines in 2009. The submarine, the last to be sent in 2017, is a huge investment. Their combined costs are equivalent to about half the size of Vietnam's entire annual defense budget. But submarines are very important for the success of sea rejection. And now, Vietnam can maintain the simultaneous deployment of 2 submarines in the South China Sea. Then, Vietnam completed its fleet by buying 4 Jeopard-class frigates and 10 Tarantula V-class corvettes from Russia. All were armed with Russian supersonic SSN-25 anti-ship cruise missiles. And finally, in 2016, Vietnam began publishing exercises to reclaim infantry islands in the Spratly Islands. Everything shows that Vietnam intends to develop a navy capable of bringing competition with China. The Philippines could have taken a similar approach, even with smaller financial outlays. By utilizing its proximity to the South China Sea, China can use anti-land cruise missile batteries to hold Chinese troops in danger. But the battery will have limited utility in situations below the brink of war. Thus, although there are still questions about the combat effectiveness of the new Philippine surface fleet, it will offer Manila a better way to deal with the maritime incidents that are common in the South China Sea today. Undoubtedly, rebuilding a navy is expensive. Only a pair of frigates that Manila bought from South Korea cost $337 million. With its economy growing at an annual rate of more than 6% since 2010, the Philippines can pay for such expenses. The real test will come when economic growth declines. Vessels are expensive to procure, maintain, and operate. And the Philippine Navy still has a long way to go before it can provide a credible deterrent to Chinese maritime activities in the South China Sea. In addition, the Philippine Navy will need support from the air. Like its Navy counterparts, the Philippine Air Force starved for decades. In 2005, the aircraft retired from its last F-5 fighter, making it an air force without a jet. But with Manila's new investment in external defense, he was able to buy a dozen South Korean F-A-50 fighter jet trainers. The new fighters offered the Navy several prospects for air protection, especially important because China could immediately operate warplanes from several airfields in the South China Sea as well as from 2 aircraft carriers. Even so, making a credible deterrent is not easy. This will require more time and more money. About halfway to building the desired power structure, the Philippine Navy is still too small to achieve its strategic objectives. Whether the Navy is truly capable or stagnant again, to a large extent, depends on the Philippine Congress not only support but also transcend the ongoing multi-phase naval expansion program.